The space around Earth's solar system rippled like water as massive ships tore through the fabric of reality. One by one, 200 alien vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their dark hulls gleaming under the distant light of the sun. The largest ship stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern, its surface covered in weapons that could crack planets in half. Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of the flagship, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the blue-green dot that was Earth through the main viewing screen. His scaled skin shifted from deep purple to satisfied crimson as he considered how easy this conquest would be. "Status report," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that made the bridge crew straighten their spines. "All ships have arrived safely." "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, a thin creature with 6 eyes that moved independently. "No signs of detection from the target world. Their primitive sensor networks have not even noticed our presence." Zektar's mouth curved into what his species considered a smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Of course they haven't. These humans are barely more advanced than the cave dwellers we crushed on Zirion Prime." The Admiral walked to his command chair, a throne-like structure that rose from the center of the bridge. Around him, dozens of crew members worked at their stations, monitoring everything from ship systems to the faint radio signals coming from Earth. "What do our scouts tell us about their military capabilities?" Zektar asked. His intelligence officer, a being with pale blue skin and an oversized head, pulled up a holographic display. Images of human aircraft, ships, and weapons appeared in the air between them. "Laughable, Admiral. They still use chemical rockets to barely escape their own gravity well. Their most powerful weapons are crude nuclear devices that would barely scratch our smallest escort ships. Most of their population doesn't even know that life exists beyond their world." The hologram showed grainy images of human cities, military bases, and what the aliens thought were humanity's most advanced spacecraft. To the hegemony forces, it looked like a civilization that had just learned to make fire. Their largest military vessels are ocean-bound ships made of metal and powered by primitive engines. The intelligence officer continued. "They have some aircraft that can fly faster than sound, but nothing that could threaten us even if we stayed in orbit and did nothing." Zektar's crimson skin deepened with pleasure. "How many defenders?" "Approximately 8 billion humans spread across their single world. Perhaps 10,000 military aircraft total. Their space presence consists of a few small stations and some communication satellites. No weapons in space at all, according to our scans." The Admiral laughed, a sound like grinding stones. In his 300 years of service to the hegemony, he had conquered 47 worlds. This would be the easiest yet. "Begin the approach," he ordered. "All ships maintain formation. Communications prepare the standard surrender demand. I want this over before their primitive astronomers even spot us." The fleet began moving toward Earth, their engines leaving no trail in the vacuum of space. The ships moved in perfect formation, a sight that had struck fear into countless species across the galaxy. Each vessel was a masterpiece of hegemony engineering, armed with plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and shields that could turn aside any weapon these humans might possess. As they traveled, the communications officers intercepted more radio signals from Earth. Music, television shows, news broadcasts, and military chatter filled the alien receivers. The crew listened with amusement to what they heard. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving some kind of entertainment broadcast. It appears to be humans pretending to fight creatures from other worlds." "Entertainment about fighting aliens?" Zektar was curious. "Let me hear it." The bridge filled with sounds from an Earth movie. Explosions, dramatic music, and human voices shouting about defending their world. The aliens listened for a few minutes before bursting into laughter. "They make stories about defeating invaders like us," wheezed the tactical officer. "How amusing. Perhaps they think their fiction will save them." "Sir," interrupted the navigation officer, "we're approaching the outer edge of their detection range. Their primitive radar systems might spot us soon." Zektar waved a dismissive hand. "Let them see us. Fear will make the surrender come faster." The fleet continued its advance, passing the orbit of the planet these humans called Pluto. Their sensors showed no resistance, no weapons, no sign that Earth even knew they were coming. A few human spacecraft moved between the inner planets, but they were clearly civilian vessels with no weapons. "Admiral," the intelligence officer spoke up again, "we're detecting some unusual readings from the third planet." "What kind of readings?" energy signatures that don't match their known technology. But they're very faint. Probably just background radiation or some natural phenomenon we haven't seen before. Zektar nodded. Irrelevant. Continue the approach. The hours passed slowly as the massive fleet drew closer to Earth. The humans had still not responded to their presence. Though the aliens knew their telescopes must have spotted the ships by now, perhaps they were frozen with fear. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a signal from the human world. It appears to be directed at us. Put it on the main screen." The viewing screen flickered and suddenly they were looking at a human face. The creature was male, middle-aged with gray hair and serious eyes. He wore what appeared to be a military uniform covered in small metal decorations. "Attention unknown vessels," the human said in what the aliens' computers translated as English. "This is General Harrison of the United Earth Defense Council. We know you're out there. We would like to open peaceful communications." The bridge fell silent. The humans knew they were coming and wanted to talk. Zektar had expected panic, maybe some pathetic attempt at resistance. He had not expected diplomacy. "Admiral," whispered the tactical officer. "They seem calm, too calm for a primitive species facing invasion." Zektar studied the human on the screen. There was no fear in those eyes, no desperation. The creature looked almost prepared. "Cut the transmission," the admiral ordered. "Continue approach. All ships, battle stations." The crew moved to obey, but something bothered Zektar. In all his conquests, primitive species either ran in terror or attacked blindly when they saw his fleet. None had ever tried to negotiate so calmly. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "we're getting more detailed scans of the human world now. There are some structures we missed in our initial survey." "What kind of structures?" "Unknown, sir. They appear to be camouflaged somehow, hidden under what looked like normal terrain. And there are energy readings that don't match anything in our databases." The admiral's skin shifted to a wary orange. "Explain." "I can't, sir. The readings suggest technology that shouldn't exist on such a primitive world, but it's probably just their crude nuclear power plants registering strangely on our sensors." Zektar stared at the image of Earth growing larger on his screen. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't identify what. His fleet was the most powerful force in this part of the galaxy. No primitive world could threaten them. "Maintain course," he commanded. "We'll be in attack position in 18 hours. Prepare the surrender demand for broadcast." But as the fleet moved closer to Earth, none of them noticed the small objects that had been watching them since they arrived. Objects that looked like space debris or asteroids but were actually something far more dangerous. The hunt was about to begin, but the hegemony didn't yet know they were the prey. Admiral Zektar decided to end the humans' pathetic attempt at diplomacy. He ordered his communications officer to open a channel to Earth and prepared to deliver the standard ultimatum that had brought dozens of worlds to their knees. The main screen flickered to life, showing the same human general from before. But this time the man was surrounded by other humans in similar uniforms. They all looked calm, almost bored, as if alien invasion fleets arrived every Tuesday. "Greetings," Zektar began, his voice echoing with the authority of the hegemony. "I am Admiral Zektar of the Kitherian Empire. You will surrender your world immediately and submit to hegemony rule. You have 24 of your hours to comply, or we will destroy your civilization." The humans looked at each other and seemed to have a brief conversation with the audio turned off. General Harrison turned back to the screen. "We appreciate the generous timeline, Admiral," the human said with what almost looked like amusement. "We would like to request a full 24 hours to consider your offer and consult with our governments." Zektar's skin flushed deeper red with anger. "Generous timeline? These primitives should be begging for mercy, not negotiating like equals." "You misunderstand, human. This is not a negotiation. Surrender or die." "We understand perfectly," Harrison replied. "But surely beings as advanced as yourselves can spare 24 hours. After all, what threat could we possibly pose to your magnificent fleet?" The Admiral's tactical officer leaned over and whispered, "Sir, this delay serves no purpose. Perhaps we should make an example of one of their military installations." Zektar considered this. A demonstration of power would show these humans the futility of resistance. He studied the display showing Earth's military bases and selected one that looked important. "Very well," he told the humans. "Since you require a demonstration, we will destroy one of your military complexes. Perhaps this will help you understand the situation. General Harrison's expression didn't change. Which installation are you planning to target? The question surprised Zektar. That is not your concern. Actually, it is. We'd prefer you didn't hit anything with civilians nearby. Might I suggest the Cheyenne Mountain facility? It's primarily military, and the surrounding area has been evacuated for training exercises. The Admiral stared at the screen. Was this human actually telling him where to attack? The audacity was incredible, but it would save him the trouble of selecting a target. Fine. Cheyenne Mountain will be destroyed in 1 hour. Watch and learn the price of defying the hegemony. The transmission ended, and Zektar turned to his tactical officer. Target the location he mentioned. Use a single plasma cannon. Make it impressive. The fleet moved into position and the designated attack ship charged its main weapon. Through their sensors, they watched the mountain complex that housed what appeared to be some kind of command center, built inside solid rock. Weapon charged and ready. Admiral, fire! A brilliant beam of superheated plasma lanced down from space, striking the mountain with enough force to vaporize several city blocks. The aliens watched with satisfaction as their sensors showed the massive explosion. But then something impossible happened. As the plasma dissipated and the smoke cleared, the mountain was still there. Not just still there, but completely undamaged. Where the plasma beam had struck, a shimmering barrier of energy flickered and then disappeared. What? Zektar stared at the display. Report, what happened to our weapon? The tactical officer frantically checked his instruments. Sir, the weapon fired correctly. Full power, direct hit. But something absorbed the entire blast. That's impossible. No known technology can stop a plasma cannon. Sir, the sensor officer called out, his voice shaking. I'm detecting massive energy signatures coming online all around the target area. And, oh no, what? Sir, structures are rising from the ground. They were hidden beneath camouflaged panels. I count dozens of weapon emplacements, all powering up. On the main screen, they watched in horror as the primitive military base transformed before their eyes. Hidden doors slid open in what had looked like natural rock formations. Massive weapon turrets rose from concealed positions. The mountain itself began to bristle with technology that their computers couldn't identify. Admiral, the communications officer said weakly, we're receiving another transmission from the humans. General Harrison appeared on screen again, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, the aliens could see a command center that looked more advanced than anything in their own fleet. Holographic displays showed tactical information that hurt their heads to look at. Did you enjoy our little demonstration, Admiral? Harrison asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Our shields work quite well, don't you think? Impossible, Zektar growled. Your species barely has spaceflight. You can't possess energy barriers that advanced. Oh, but we do. We have many things that might surprise you. For instance, did you know that we've been watching your fleet since you entered our solar system? Our early warning network detected your hyperspace emergence 17 minutes before you completed translation. The Admiral's blood went cold. Early warning network? These humans had faster-than-light sensors? Harrison continued. We've also been monitoring your internal communications. Your translation systems aren't as secure as you think. We know all about your standard invasion procedures. Admiral Zektar of the Catherian Empire. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery. How could these primitives have broken hegemony encryption? You're bluffing, Zektar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Let me see. Your fleet consists of 200 vessels. Your flagship is the Destroyer of Worlds, currently running at 87% reactor efficiency because of a minor plasma leak in Conduit 7. Your tactical officer is Commander Thextal, who's wondering why his plasma cannon had no effect on our shields. Commander Thextal made a choking sound. Everything the human had said was correct, down to technical details that should have been impossible for outsiders to know. How? Zektar began. How do we know these things? Admiral, did you really think you were the first aliens to visit our system? We've been preparing for guests like you for quite some time. More energy signatures began appearing on their sensors. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids powered up throughout the solar system. Stealth ships that their sensors hadn't detected began revealing themselves. Sir, the sensor officer reported, his voice barely a whisper. I'm counting over 500 weapons platforms, and at least 50 ships that weren't there before. They were always there, Harrison said, apparently able to hear their communications. "You just weren't looking hard enough. Our stealth technology is rather good." Zektar felt his world tilting. This was supposed to be a primitive species. They should have been cowering in fear, not demonstrating technology that surpassed the hegemony's best equipment. "What are you?" he whispered. General Harrison's smile grew wider but colder. "We're humans, Admiral, and we've been waiting for you for a very long time. The question now is, do you still want to proceed with your invasion, or would you prefer to leave our system while you still can?" Alarms began sounding throughout the hegemony fleet as more and more human weapons came online. The tactical display showed their ships surrounded by firepower they couldn't even properly measure. "Sir," Commander Thextal said urgently, "I recommend we withdraw immediately. We're outnumbered and outgunned." But Admiral Zektar had spent 3 centuries conquering worlds for the hegemony. His pride wouldn't let him retreat from a single primitive planet, no matter what tricks they had. "All ships, attack formation. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." Harrison sighed on the screen. "I was hoping you'd be more reasonable." "Very well, Admiral. But remember, you chose this." The transmission ended and every human weapon in the solar system powered up to full charge. The hunt was about to begin in earnest, and the hegemony was about to learn what it meant to be prey. Admiral Zektar gave the order to attack, expecting his overwhelming fleet to crush the human resistance within hours. The hegemony had perfected the art of planetary conquest over centuries, and no primitive world had ever lasted more than a day against their might. "All ships, advance to attack positions," he commanded. "Target their largest population centers. We'll break their spirit with overwhelming force." The 200 hegemony vessels moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charging and shields at maximum power. It should have been a glorious sight, the kind that made entire civilizations surrender at first glimpse. Instead, it became a nightmare. The moment the fleet crossed into Earth's inner solar system, everything went wrong at once, Admiral. The sensor officer screamed. "We're detecting massive energy spikes throughout the system." The space around them exploded into chaos. What had looked like empty void suddenly filled with weapons fire as hidden human platforms revealed themselves. Railgun rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed tore through the hegemony formation. Energy beams that violated several laws of physics carved through shields that should have been impenetrable. "Impossible!" Commander Thextal shouted over the alarms. "Where are they firing from?" His answer came as a human battleship decloaked directly above them, so close they could see individual weapon ports along its hull. The ship was massive, nearly as large as their flagship, and covered in technology the hegemony computers couldn't identify. "How did that get there?" Zektar demanded. "I don't know, sir. It wasn't on sensors 30 seconds ago." More ships appeared throughout the fleet formation. Sleek human vessels that had somehow positioned themselves among the hegemony ships without being detected. They opened fire at point-blank range, their weapons cutting through alien hulls like paper. "Sir, we're losing ships," the tactical officer reported. "The Fist of Vengeance just exploded. The Star Crusher is venting atmosphere." Zektar watched in horror as his perfect invasion fleet was torn apart by enemies who shouldn't exist. Human ships moved with impossible speed and precision, their weapons striking with devastating accuracy. Worse, they seemed to know exactly where to hit each hegemony vessel for maximum damage. "Return fire. All ships, return fire." The hegemony fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and graviton bombs filled space with destructive energy. For a moment, Zektar thought they might turn the battle around. Then the human shields activated. Every incoming shot struck barriers of pure energy that simply absorbed the attacks. The humans had energy shields that made the hegemony's best defenses look like paper armor. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through." A new human appeared on screen, this one wearing a different uniform with more decorations. She was older than General Harrison, with silver hair and eyes like ice. "I am Admiral Chen of the Solar Defense Fleet," she said calmly, while explosions lit up the space behind her. "Admiral Zektar, you have 10 minutes to order your ships to stand down and surrender. After that, we will destroy every vessel in your fleet." "You're bluffing," Zektar snarled. "We outnumber you." Admiral Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Do you? Computer, show our guest the actual numbers." The screen split, showing a tactical display that made Zektar's blood freeze. What he thought was a fleet of 50 human ships was actually over 300. Stealth vessels were decloaking throughout the system, revealing themselves in perfect firing positions. "How many ships do you really have?" he whispered. "Enough," Chen replied. "We've been building our fleet for quite some time, Admiral." "Did you think we spent the last century just playing with rockets?" More alarms sounded as human weapons found their targets. The hegemony ship Eternal Domination broke in half, its reactor core breaching in a brilliant explosion. The Fearbringer listed helplessly as its engines died, atmosphere streaming from dozens of hull breaches. "Sir," Commander Thextal said urgently, "our weapons aren't working. Their shields are absorbing everything we throw at them. All ships concentrate fire on a single target," Sektar ordered. "Bring down their shields through overwhelming force." The remaining hegemony vessels focused their attack on one human battleship, pouring enough firepower to destroy a small moon into its shields. The energy barrier flickered but held firm. In response, the human ship fired a single shot. The beam that emerged from its main cannon was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. It wasn't plasma or particle energy, but something that seemed to bend space itself. The shot struck the hegemony cruiser Worldbreaker and simply erased it. Not destroyed, not exploded, erased. One moment the ship was there, the next there was empty space. What was that weapon? Sektar demanded. "Classified," Admiral Chen replied. "But we have plenty more where that came from." As if to prove her point, every human ship fired similar weapons. Hegemony vessels began disappearing from the tactical display as shots that twisted reality itself found their targets. "Sir," the sensor officer reported in a broken voice, "we've lost 40% of the fleet. The humans aren't even using their full firepower." Sektar stared at the display showing his mighty invasion fleet being systematically destroyed by enemies who fought like they knew every weakness, every blind spot, every tactical doctrine the hegemony possessed. "How do they know our ship so well?" he asked. Admiral Chen heard the question. "Because we've been studying you for longer than you think, Admiral. Every ship design, every weapon system, every tactical manual, we have it all." "That's impossible. Our security, your security has more holes than a meteor-damaged hull," Chen interrupted. "We've had people inside your empire for decades. Did you really think you were the only species capable of intelligence gathering?" The implications hit Sektar like a physical blow. If the humans had been spying on the hegemony for decades, they would know everything. Ship designs, fleet movements, strategic plans, all of it compromised. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "I'm detecting coded transmissions throughout our fleet. Someone is broadcasting hegemony military codes." "What? That's impossible." Admiral Chen's smile grew wider. "Is it?" "Admiral, meet Commander Sarah Kim, formerly known to your people as Science Officer Zixara." A human woman appeared next to Chen on the screen. She looked perfectly normal, but when she spoke, her voice carried the distinctive accent of a hegemony officer. "Greetings, Admiral," she said in perfect Catherian. "I've spent 5 years aboard hegemony vessels, learning your technology and reporting back to Earth. Your security screening is remarkably poor." Sektar felt his world crashing down around him. "Human spies within the hegemony fleet? For years. How many of you are there?" he whispered. "Enough," Commander Kim replied. "We know about the reinforcement fleet hiding behind Jupiter's moons. We know about your fallback plans. We even know about the doomsday weapon you're hoping to use if this invasion fails. The doomsday weapon was the hegemony's most closely guarded secret. If the humans knew about that..." "Sir," Commander Thextal said quietly, "I recommend immediate withdrawal. We're not fighting a primitive species. We're fighting an enemy that knows us better than we know ourselves." Admiral Sektar looked at his tactical display. Half his fleet was gone, and the other half was barely holding together. The humans hadn't even deployed their full strength yet. For the first time in his 3 centuries of conquest, Admiral Sektar gave an order he had never thought he would speak. "All ships, retreat. Full withdrawal, maximum speed." Admiral Chen's voice followed them as they fled. "A wise choice, Admiral. But don't think this is over. We'll be in touch." As the surviving hegemony ships limped away from Earth, Sektar realized the horrible truth. They hadn't been defeated by a primitive species. They had been outmaneuvered, outfought and outsmarted by an enemy that had been planning for this moment far longer than anyone had imagined. The hunt was over, and the hegemony had been the prey all along. The interrogation room aboard the human vessel was nothing like what Commander Thextal had expected from a primitive species. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of smart material that shifted between transparency and opacity. The lighting adjusted automatically to his comfort levels, and the chair had somehow molded itself to fit his alien physiology perfectly. More disturbing than the advanced technology was the human sitting across from him. General Harrison looked completely relaxed, as if capturing senior hegemony officers was something he did every Tuesday. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Harrison said, gesturing to a table that held what appeared to be Thextal's favorite food from his homeworld. "We know you haven't eaten properly in several cycles." Thexidal stared at the food in shock. "How do you know what my species eats?" "We know quite a lot about the Catherian people," Harrison replied calmly. "Your biology, your culture, your history. Did you know that your homeworld was actually conquered by the hegemony 200 years ago? Your people weren't always the oppressors, Commander." The words hit Thextal like a physical blow. His species history book spoke of willing alliance with the hegemony. "Not conquest, that's a lie," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Harrison activated a holographic display that showed historical documents, video records and testimonies from Catherian survivors of the original invasion. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "Your people fought bravely," Harrison continued, "but they were overwhelmed, just like you tried to do to us. The difference is, we were ready." "How could you be ready? You're a single world barely capable of spaceflight." Harrison laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused rather than mocking. "Commander, that's exactly what we wanted you to think. Tell me, what do your records say about first contact with humanity?" Thextal searched his memory. "First contact was 7 years ago. Your crude radio signals were detected by a survey probe." 7 years ago," Harrison repeated. "Now let me show you something." The holographic display changed, showing what appeared to be a human space station. But this wasn't the primitive orbital platforms the hegemony intelligence had reported. This was a massive structure, clearly designed for military purposes with technology that made hegemony ships look like children's toys. "This is Outpost Prometheus," Harrison explained. "We built it 43 years ago. It's been watching the hyperspace routes leading to your territory ever since." "Impossible," Thextal whispered. "Here's another one," Harrison continued. The display showed a different station, even larger and more advanced. "This is Monitoring Station Athena, built 51 years ago. And here's Survey Platform Zeus, operational for 62 years. The images kept coming. Dozens of human installations scattered throughout space, all of them older than first contact. All of them clearly designed to watch and study alien civilizations. You see, Commander, humans have been exploring the galaxy for much longer than anyone realizes. We're very good at staying hidden when we want to be." Thextal's mind reeled. "But the radio signals, the primitive technology we observed, carefully crafted theater," Harrison said with a smile. "We've been broadcasting fake radio signals to make ourselves look primitive, while our real communication network uses quantum entanglement. Instantaneous communication across any distance, completely undetectable by conventional sensors." The holographic display showed Earth as it really was, not the primitive world the hegemony thought they knew. Hidden beneath the surface were massive underground cities, space elevators disguised as mountains, and weapon installations that dwarfed anything in the alien fleet. "We've been watching the hegemony for over a century," Harrison continued. "Every ship design, every tactical doctrine, every strategic plan. We know about your secret research facilities, your experimental weapons, even your plans for species you haven't conquered yet." "How?" Thextal asked weakly. Harrison activated another display, this one showing dozens of human faces with alien names and identities beneath them. "Meet the Solar Intelligence Network," he said proudly. "Humans who have spent years, sometimes decades, living within hegemony society. Scientists, traders, mercenaries, even military officers. They look like your people, talk like your people, and think like your people. But they report to us." One face stood out among the others. Thextal recognized her immediately. "Dr. Kelnara," he breathed. "She's been our chief xenobiologist for 15 years. "Actually, she's Dr. Jennifer Walsh from New Toronto," Harrison corrected. "She volunteered for genetic modification and deep cover assignment when she was 25. She's now 47, and she's provided us with detailed information about hegemony biological warfare research. The implications were staggering. If humans had been infiltrating hegemony society for decades, they would know everything. Military secrets, technological developments, political structures, all of it compromised. Your infiltrators must have been discovered, Thexdal said desperately. Our security screenings are thorough. Harrison shook his head. Commander, we helped design your security screenings. Agent Walsh submitted the recommendations that became your standard biological authentication protocols. She made sure they wouldn't detect human modifications. The room seemed to spin around Thexdal. Every assumption he had about human capabilities, about their technology, about their knowledge of the galaxy, had been wrong. What are you? He whispered. We're explorers, Harrison said simply. We've been traveling between the stars for over 2 centuries, but we learned early that the galaxy is a dangerous place. So we developed a simple survival strategy. Learn everything about potential threats while revealing nothing about ourselves. The display showed human ships throughout the galaxy, not the crude vessels in Earth orbit, but sleek craft that looked more advanced than anything the hegemony possessed. They moved through alien space undetected, observing, recording, learning. We've studied 47 different species, Commander. We know their technologies, their tactics, their weaknesses. The hegemony was just one more puzzle to solve. But why? Thexdal asked. Why all the deception? Why not make peaceful contact? Harrison's expression grew serious. Because we've seen what the hegemony does to worlds it considers weak. We've watched you conquer species after species, enslaving entire civilizations. We decided long ago that we would never be victims. The display showed recordings from hegemony conquests. Worlds burning, populations enslaved, entire species reduced to servitude. Thexdal had participated in some of these campaigns, believing they were bringing order to primitive civilizations. Instead, Harrison continued, we chose to become the apex predator. We studied our potential enemies, prepared for every contingency, and waited for the day they would come for us. And now, Harrison smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. Now we're ready to change the balance of power in this galaxy. The hegemony's reign of terror is over, Commander. Every species you've enslaved is about to receive a very interesting transmission. As if summoned by his words, the holographic display showed communications equipment across dozens of worlds beginning to receive signals. The faces of enslaved aliens appeared on screen as they listened to transmissions in their own languages. We're broadcasting evidence of hegemony crimes to every world under your control, Harrison explained, along with detailed technical specifications for weapons and defensive systems. We're also providing them with something the hegemony never gave them: hope. The recording showed enslaved populations rising up, armed with weapons that could match hegemony technology. Defensive shields protecting their cities, communication networks that the hegemony couldn't intercept. You're starting a galactic war, Thexdal said in horror. No, Harrison corrected. We're ending one. The hegemony has been at war with freedom for centuries. We're just evening the odds. The display showed the strategic situation across hegemony space. Supply lines were being cut by mysterious attacks. Communication networks were being jammed. Key installations were falling to primitive species that suddenly possessed advanced technology. How long have you been planning this? Since the day we first detected hegemony expansion patterns, Harrison said. We've been preparing for this moment for over a century. Every human expedition, every intelligence operation, every technological development has been aimed at this goal. Thexdal slumped in his chair, overwhelmed by the scope of human planning. What happens now? Now you get to choose, Harrison said kindly. You can return to what's left of the hegemony and watch it crumble, or you can stay here and help us build something better. What do you mean? The Catherian people deserve better than being tools of oppression. We're offering them a chance to reclaim their freedom, to remember who they were before the hegemony broke their spirit. The holographic display showed Thexdal's homeworld, but not as he knew it. This was Kythera as it had been before the conquest, with art and culture and music that had been forbidden for 2 centuries. We want to help your people remember their heritage, Harrison said, and we want them to help us build a galaxy where conquest is no longer possible. For the first time in his life, Commander Thexdal began to understand what freedom really meant, and for the first time since his capture, he began to hope. Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of his crippled flagship, watching the hyperspace countdown with growing desperation. Of the 200 vessels that had approached Earth in perfect formation, only 37 remained functional enough for interstellar travel. The rest were either destroyed or too damaged to make the jump home. Jump in 30 seconds, the navigation officer reported, his voice hollow with defeat. Zektar had spent the entire retreat trying to understand what had happened. How had a primitive species defeated the might of the hegemony? How had humans known so much about their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses? The answer came as they prepared to enter hyperspace. "Admiral," the communications officer called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from the Hegemony High Command. Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Supreme Commander Vexitar, the highest military authority in the hegemony. But something was wrong with the transmission. The image kept cutting out and there was panic in the Supreme Commander's eyes. "Admiral Zektar," Vextar said, his voice distorted by interference, "you must return immediately. We are under attack. Our core worlds are being hit by unknown forces. The supply routes are cut. Half our fleet is missing." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Unknown forces?" Zektar whispered. "But we're the only expedition in this region of space." His answer came as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of hegemony territory. What they found waiting for them was impossible. Human ships, not one or two, but dozens of them. Sleek vessels that looked nothing like the primitive craft Earth had displayed to the galaxy. These ships were clearly built for war, bristling with weapons that radiated power even when inactive. "How did they get here before us?" Commander Thexidal asked in disbelief. "We left Earth hours ago." The answer came from the lead human vessel, a massive battleship that dwarfed even their flagship. "Admiral Zektar," a familiar voice said as Admiral Chen appeared on their screen. "Welcome to the new reality." "Impossible," Zektar snarled. "You can't be here. We just left you at Earth." Chen smiled, and the expression was terrifying in its confidence. "Admiral, did you really think we only had one fleet? We've been building ships for over a century, and we've been positioning them throughout the galaxy for decades." The tactical display showed the horrible truth. Human ships were appearing throughout hegemony space, emerging from hiding places that should have been impossible to reach undetected. They struck with surgical precision, targeting supply depots, communication arrays, and command centers. "Our intelligence network has been mapping your infrastructure for 50 years, Chen continued. "We know the location of every military base, every shipyard, every strategic resource. More importantly, we know exactly how to bring it all down." "You're destroying everything," Zektar said, his voice breaking. "No, Admiral, we're liberating everything." The display changed to show worlds throughout hegemony space. On planet after planet, the enslaved populations were rising up against their oppressors. But these weren't primitive rebellions doomed to failure. The rebels had weapons that could match hegemony technology, shields that could stop orbital bombardment, and communication networks that couldn't be jammed. "Every species you conquered is fighting back," Chen explained. "And they're winning. We've been secretly arming them for years, waiting for the right moment to strike." On the planet Xerion Prime, the reptilian natives that had been enslaved for 3 centuries were storming the hegemony administration buildings with plasma weapons and powered armor. On Talus 7, the aquatic species that had been forced to work in underwater mines were destroying the extraction platforms with torpedoes that could punch through battleship hulls. "This is madness," Zektar said. "You're destroying the stability of the entire galaxy." "We're destroying a system built on oppression and slavery," Chen corrected. "What comes next will be better." The display showed more human ships decloaking throughout the hegemony. They moved with perfect coordination, striking targets that would cause maximum disruption to the military machine while minimizing harm to civilian populations. "Sir," the sensor officer reported weakly, "I'm detecting massive explosions at the Crucible shipyards. The entire facility is gone." The Crucible was the hegemony's primary ship construction facility. Without it, they couldn't replace the losses from their failed invasion of Earth. "The command nexus is under attack," another officer reported. "Long-range communications are down across 7 sectors. Supply Depot Omega has been destroyed. That was our primary ammunition storage for this entire region." The reports kept coming, each one describing another critical facility falling to human attack. It was as if the humans had studied the hegemony for decades and identified every weak point in their empire. Which, Zektar realized with growing horror, was exactly what they had done. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Since we first learned about the hegemony," Chen replied. We spent the first few decades just gathering intelligence. Then we began the slow process of infiltration and preparation. Everything that happened at Earth was just the opening move in a much larger game. But why? Why go to such lengths? Chen's expression grew serious. Because we've seen what happens to species that aren't prepared. We've watched the hegemony conquer 47 civilizations, enslave billions of beings, and crush any hope of freedom across half the galaxy. We decided that had to end. The tactical display now showed the scope of human operations. It wasn't just military strikes. They were also broadcasting information to every world in hegemony space. Historical records showing the true history of conquered peoples. Technological specifications for defensive systems, even cultural archives that the hegemony had tried to destroy. You're giving them back their identities, Zektar realized. Among other things, Chen agreed. Did you know that the hegemony has been suppressing artistic expression for centuries? We've preserved the music, literature, and art of dozens of species. Now we're returning it to them. On the display, they could see celebrations beginning on liberated worlds, people singing songs that had been forbidden for generations, displaying art that had been hidden for centuries, practicing religions that the hegemony had banned. Sir, the communications officer said quietly, we're receiving surrender signals from across the Empire. Entire fleets are laying down their arms. Many of the hegemony's subject species had never wanted to fight for their oppressors. Given the choice between serving an empire built on conquest and joining a coalition that promised freedom, the decision was easy. Admiral, Chen said, drawing his attention back to the screen, I'm prepared to offer you the same choice we've given everyone else. You can continue fighting for a system that's already fallen, or you can help us build something better. What are you offering? Truth, Chen said simply. The hegemony told you that conquest was necessary for galactic stability, that some species were naturally meant to rule while others were meant to serve. That freedom led to chaos and war. Isn't that true? Look around you, Admiral. We've just dismantled the largest military empire in this part of the galaxy, and we did it without destroying a single populated world. The rebellions we've sparked are targeting oppression, not civilians. The new alliances forming between liberated worlds are based on mutual aid, not domination. The display showed the aftermath of the human strategy. Former hegemony worlds were already forming new partnerships, sharing technology and resources freely. Species that had been enemies under the hegemony system were working together to rebuild their civilizations. This is what the galaxy looks like when freedom replaces fear, Chen continued. When cooperation replaces conquest. Zektar looked at his bridge crew, seeing the hope beginning to appear in their eyes. These beings had spent their entire lives serving an empire that demanded obedience without question. Now they were seeing an alternative. What happens to us? He asked. That depends on what you choose to do, Chen replied. The hegemony as a military force is finished, but the species that served it don't have to be. You can help us contact other empires. Warn them about what happens when they target worlds that aren't as defenseless as they appear. You want us to become spies for you? Chen shook her head. We want you to become ambassadors for a better way. The galaxy has other empires like the hegemony, other species that think conquest is the only path to security. They need to understand that there's an alternative. And if they don't listen, Chen's smile returned, cold and predatory, then they'll discover what the hegemony just learned. That humanity has been preparing for threats like them for a very long time. Admiral Zektar looked at the tactical display one last time. The hegemony was finished. Its fleet scattered, its infrastructure in ruins. But the galaxy wasn't burning. Instead, it was being reborn as something better. For the first time in his long military career, he began to understand what victory really looked like. Admiral Chen, he said formally, the hegemony fleet surrenders. We would like to discuss terms for joining your coalition. Chen nodded approvingly. Welcome to the Free Galaxy, Admiral. We have a lot of work to do. As human ships move to escort the surrendering hegemony vessels to safety,